I decided to make a video on how to create custom scripts to be used in the Bannerlord scene editor, as I could not find all of this info in one place myself, so here it is. The first thing you need to do is install the Bannerlord modding kit and set up your development environment if you have not already. If you have not, then watch the videos I linked in the description, as it tells you how to do this. It's easy and doesn't take long. After you have done that, there is an additional setup step that I will show you. You must add a second build folder called win64_shipping_w editor. Then you must go to project properties and add this build event to make the build produce a DLL file for this new folder as well. This will allow you to use your mod in the Bannerlord editor, which you must do. I have an example custom script to show you, as well as a map that heavily uses it. First, let's look at the custom script in the editor. On the right under scripts, you see the custom script, cs_move back and forth. This script can be attached to an entity in the editor, and values can be put in to tell the object to move in any direction, either back and forth or only once. We see values for the first destination, that being x/y/z1, and the second destination x/y/z2. There are also movement speeds for these directions, as well as values to slow down at a certain distance by a certain speed. This is useful in the case of this transport raft, as it makes it so the raft will slow down when it's close to the landing platform, so players can get off safely. At the top we see two Boolean values, enable in game and enable in editor. That way I can prevent the entity from moving around in the editor while I'm trying to work. It only moves during an actual game according to how I have it set now. We can enable in editor to see what it does. You see it travels to the first destination, which is the island, then travels to the second destination, which is the starting zone. It is a transport. So now that you are familiar with what the script looks like in the editor, let's look at the code. At the top you can see the script uses the Tailworld engine and Tailworld's library. It's in the namespace of my module. The class inherits from the script component behavior class, and by doing this it makes the class a script in the eyes of the game. So this means that when you load up the editor, the class will appear in the drop-down lists of scripts. It also means that any public variable, which you see below, will appear as an input value in the script user interface in the editor. We just saw this. The protected variables below the public ones are basically public variables that will not show up as an input value, as we don't want these variables to be modified by the user. The way that the game runs the script is this. Basically, a game runs in a giant loop which occurs every frame. So if you are running at 60 frames per second, this loop runs 60 times per second. When this loop happens, the onTick method is automatically called by the game. If you are in the scene editor, the editor will call the onEditorTick method instead, which is basically the same thing but for the editor. You see that onTick takes a float dt, which is the time in seconds since the onTick method was last called, so the time since the last frame basically. In onTick the script calls the move method. Because movement happens on each frame, frame rate impacts speed. The faster the frame rate, the faster the entity will move. We want it to move at the same speed regardless of frame rate, so we create the movement frame modifier variable, which we multiply our speed by in order to normalize movement speed around 60 frames per second. I'm not going to go over in detail the rest of the code, as it's just normal code with no unusual things to point out. The next thing to talk about is how to figure out what code to write in order to do what you want. There are two tools for this. One is the Bannerlord documentation, which I have linked below. The second is decompiling Bannerlord DLLs. I have included a video on that as well. Basically, if you want to know how to do something, like move an object, and you know there is a native Bannerlord script that can do that, then you decompile the DLLs, and look up that script and see how they do it. I will now show a brief clip of the example map to show some of the ways a script like this can be used. I think that custom scripts create a lot of possibilities for maps.